And she was kind of making fun of them for caring about the party and for caring about the kids.
Hi, we are Julie and Kelly, and we are here to find love. We are recapping season 26, The Bachelor, Clayton's season, episode 2. We're going to be jumping right into the recap of the episode and then analyzing some themes that are slowly emerging from the villains this season. So, Kelly, I still don't really remember a lot of their names. Tell us what happened during the episode. We need to know.
These early episodes is just everyone is kind of blurring together. The main things that went down in episode 2 were just, we had basically the introduction of our villains for the season, or who seemed to be our villains for the season. So we have Cassidy and Shanae, who both kind of had their own little mini bits of drama in their group dates. And then we had one-on-one with Susie, who seemed to have a pretty good one-on-one. So we'll start off by talking about our two villains, Cassidy and Shanae, and what went down with them and analyzing some of their behavior that we saw in the episode. And then we'll wrap up by talking about some of the emerging connections that are sticking out to us. Some of the girls, the contestants that we think have a promising connection with Clayton. So stick around to the end of the video to hear who is catching our eye. Let's start off with Cassidy first. So Cassidy was on a group date, the first group date of the episode and of the season with Clayton, and it was basically like a kids' party. They had to throw a party featuring Hillary Duff.
That was kind of amazing.
Which, by the way, was kind of great. I love that the card said, "This is what dreams are made of." I was like, yes! Like, hey now, hey now.
Yes. My God, I love that movie. That defined my childhood.
Classic. Just a classic. Oh my gosh. I definitely freaked out. As soon as I heard the card, I was like, oh my God, it's Hillary Duff. So
I thought the same thing, dude. I was like, this has to be her. This is like a spell. It just conjures her.
Basically what happened was Cassidy just didn't really care about the kids. She made it pretty clear that she wasn't interested in kids and wasn't interested in participating in the activity, and she just pulled Clayton aside several times to make out with him, which seemed to work on him. So Cassidy has created a bit of a villain narrative for herself. All the girls are pretty mad at her, and she kind of went off on them, just kind of making fun of them for even caring about the activity and for caring about the kids. So we've got our first villain. Julie, what did you think of the scene?
I thought that, well, first, I'm really glad that she was on a group date, because I think that, like, how you play around others is really indicative to, like, how you are as a person. Like, when you're with your friends, when you're in a group, like, do you collaborate? Do you rebel? Like, what's your role in that? Because I think it tells you a lot about how you're interacting in, like, different situations moving forward. So it was really interesting to see how she was so, like, she was antagonistic towards the group. It's not like she was just wanting to, like, kiss Clayton. She was making them feel stupid for wanting to do the group date, because she was like, it's all about Clayton. And it's like, it is, but there's, like, social rules that come into play that get you to, that, like, increase likability. And she was, like, actively repelling against that by just moving towards Clayton so hard. And that, to me, if I was Clayton, I would be super unattracted to someone that doesn't know how to, like, manage themselves and interactions properly. Because then I think if I get into a relationship with them, they're not going to be able to, like, they're going to be in constant drama, constant fights, because that's kind of just, like, she has this weird thing of instant gratification. So that's what I saw from it. It was interesting from our last episode, because we both spoke about how we could see Clayton really bonding with a lot of people and not getting him into trouble. And that's very true. Like, I think he's attracted to, like, shy girls, but he's also really attracted to confident, take charge girls, and that is confusing to the house, because they're like, what do you want, you know?
Totally. I was picking up on that too, because, and this kind of is jumping ahead a little bit, but he went on his one-on-one with Susie, and his whole thing with Susie was like, oh, I love how she's so humble and she's so sweet. But then to Cassidy, he was like, I love how she's so confident and she's so assertive. Like, he was describing two opposite traits.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's what I look for in a woman. That's what I look for in a woman. I'm like, what do you look for in a woman, Clayton? I think you just like anyone who is like into you and attractive. I was just kind of like, this just kind of confirmed our whole like theory of last week, which is that, you know, Clayton's a bit of a typeless guy, just doesn't really have a type as much as he just is kind of like vibing with whoever, which is fine. It's not like a bad quality. It just really felt evident given that he was vibing with such different types of people. Like Susie and Cassidy felt pretty different. And even like Teddi, Serene, all of these like really like kind of pleasant, calm, peaceful, humble women versus Cassidy felt like a pretty big like there was a pretty big divide between them, and yet he seemed to be really into both types of women. So that definitely was coming up. And then I completely agree with what you're saying about Cassidy. It was definitely like very telling in the group situation. Like her personality was just like, I think it's cool to not care. Like it was like that was kind of her vibe, and it's like, oh my gosh, like that was cool like maybe in 1986 or something, but it's like it's just like that kind of old like boring trope of like, oh my gosh, like everyone cares about this thing, I don't care, I'm so cool for not caring, right? Like that's kind of like was her whole thing, like everyone cares about kids but not me because I'm interesting and I'm different. And it's like, ugh, I'm so bored. Like,
dude, I know it's the worst type of like quality, I think, when when people are being enthusiastic about something and they're shaming you for it because you're like showing your emotions. She like there's something about her that feels very diminishing and like just not fun, just
condescending.
To be around.
Yeah,
super condescending, dude. Like when I just saw that group date, I was like, I knew he was going to give her the rose because he wasn't seeing so much of the background. But, like, I think that's something that, like, Clayton should pay attention to. It's not just how someone is around you. How are they when you're not looking at them? Like, when they're moving around the shadows or, like, doing whatever, like, pay attention to that because that's who they really are. It's not this, like, facade that they're presenting in, like, an early date or, like, an early connection. So... Yeah, I don't know if she's, like, leaning into the villain thing just because she, you know, it's a TV show. She wants to, like, get invited on BIP because she knows that she might not make it to the end. But it was interesting how Cassidy and Shanae were talking about the show, like, for what it was, which was kind of like a competition. Like, they were very aware of, like, if you get an early rose, this means you stay on longer, you know? Right.
They, like, definitely felt very... They were definitely people who had watched the show before, or at least Cassidy was, and she was telling Shanae about, like, here's kind of how this works. Like, you could just really tell that, you know, they had a bit of strategy going on, and, you know, I'm sure it'll all come out eventually in time, but, yeah, it definitely struck me as... Yeah, I can't even really tell if Cassidy meaningfully likes Clayton as much as she, like, thinks he's hot and thinks it would be fun to, like, win or to just, like, get far enough and be on TV. You know, like, that's kind of more the vibe I get. Because especially because she's, like, she was very clear about not liking kids. And Clayton has been, his whole shtick as the Bachelor is, like, I want to have a family. Like, that was his whole thing. So it's, like, if you know that about Clayton, you should know that you're not a good fit because you don't like kids. And the fact that like, she doesn't care about that just shows that she's really not thinking meaningfully about having a relationship with Clayton. She's just like, it's fun to make out with this hot guy. Like, and it's like, okay.
Excellent point. Yeah, that about sums up her whole character arc on the show. Like, she just doesn't take it as seriously as the other women do, which is why... another reason why she's succeeding, because she just doesn't care as much. And not caring, that attitude really takes you far in dating. Because you're not inhibited, you know? Like, you're not so self-conscious, you're not as nervous, like... Yeah. So that's the power, the allure of someone like Cassidy.
The only other thing about Cassidy, too, is just the way she entered into her fight with the rest of the women. Like, when the women brought up to her that, like, hey, you really didn't participate in making this kids party happen, and you were pretty disengaged from the group, project. And she was kind of making fun of them for caring about the party and for caring about the kids. It was so funny watching them talk because, not funny, I guess, it was just like, you could really see that her intention was to make them feel small for caring about the things that they cared about, which were the kids and the activity, right? You can really see that. It was like it was like minimizing, right? Her intention was to like minimize them and to make them feel like they are, not smart, or like they are silly and that their ideas are silly. And that tactic, it kind of dovetails into gaslighting, which I don't think it quite was, but it was definitely like in the vein of, rather than meaningfully engage with what these people were saying, which was true, she didn't help with the party, she just spun it around into, let me make fun of you for even being upset. Let me make fun of you for even caring. And that is, again, the mark of, frankly, just, a mean person, and a person who, doesn't really care who gets hurt, doesn't really care about other people other than herself and the things that she wants. And so that was kind of what stuck out to me during that fight. And, hopefully Clayton is going to see that eventually. It seems like he is based on previews, but, who knows. Okay, so anyways, that's all on Cassidy. Let's move into our other villain, Shanae. So Shanae had basically a similar thing happen on her date, where she just she went on a group date with a bunch of women, and she kind of like realized, not the same thing, I guess. It was actually not the same thing as what happened with Cassidy. What happened with Shanae was that she realized she was not getting attention from Clayton, and then she decided to lash out on the girl who was getting attention, Elizabeth. So she just started targeting Elizabeth and telling Clayton that Elizabeth was doing XYZ, and it emerged into this whole big fight. And for some reason, she started making fun of Elizabeth's ADHD, which was super inappropriate, random, and just, it felt like kind of gross to me. I was like, what is going on in this scene? Julie, what did you think about that fight as it was unfolding?
I thought the exact same thing as I was seeing her, because Elizabeth offered it as an explanation to why, Shanae was perceiving her a certain way, but she took her explaining that as like a weakness, and just like a bully does, they exploit weaknesses, they make fun of it, they pick it apart, and like, it just was a little bit, I used to recruit, and like, when you recruit, there's like having ADHD is a disability of some kind,
Right,
like,
it is.
To judge her for it, and for her to like talk the way that she did, which was really unprofessional and really telling of her personality, that was just, it just gave all of these red flags of like, oh my God, this is like an emotionally unsafe person to be around, because if I tell her something about me, she may use it against me later on, or she may not believe me, or she may minimize me. It was very much like what Cassidy did. Downplaying all of the woman's feelings on the group date when they were trying to explain how they felt. She did the exact same thing to Elizabeth. So I just thought that was just like really, that display of emotional immaturity was just really tough to watch. It made a lot of sense on why Cassidy and Shanae get along in the house so much.
I know.
Like attracts like, they flock together for sure.
Right.
But that was alarming for me to see, because like, she is a recruiter. Like, this is her job. She understands that like, there are some people that have that like neurodivergence, and that's totally fine and it's valid. And for her to like dismiss it was just like very alarming to me. That was, when I was watching the fight, I was like, this is icky. I don't like watching this at all.
Right. I felt so bad for Elizabeth, because you're right. She did bring up her ADHD to explain what was going on, right? Shanae was like, I felt like you were like not even hearing what I was saying. You were like ignoring me. And Shanae was like, oh my gosh, the reason that happens is because I have auditory issues related to my ADHD. She was literally like, you're right, I didn't hear you and I'm sorry. Like, she literally was like, yes, I did not hear you, and this is why. It's because I have this disability, I have this mental health condition. And Shanae was like, yeah, but you ignored me. It was like she like completely like didn't like get it. It, like, went right over her head, and then she was like, ADHD, and then she just, like, hooked on to that, and then she just kept repeating it over and over, and it was, like, exactly what you said. It felt like just, like, oh, I can now take this thing that is, you know, already stigmatized, and I know that people judge people who have conditions like this. Let me use this to, like, make this person small and to make this person feel bad and to make other people think poorly of her. And it just felt I felt so bad for Elizabeth, because it just felt like, you know, Elizabeth was just, like, there having a good time in her group date, like, flirting with Clayton. Like, Elizabeth was just kind of, like, trying to date a cute boy, and now all of a sudden she has to, like, confront, like, direct ableism. Like, it's just so annoying. It's just so frustrating, because now, look, you could tell by during that rose ceremony, like, by that time, and the ADHD just kept coming up. Everyone was just suddenly talking about it. You can tell that she was like, oh my God, like, now I have to. It's kind of like, you know, we had a conversation about racism last season, right, related to Michelle's season. And it's kind of like that feeling of, like, you don't want to have to deal with racism in every fucking situation. But then when it comes up, all of a sudden it's like all of your fucking trauma comes up, and now it's, like, hard for you to even really engage. It's hard for you to because you're just getting stressed out thinking about how are people perceiving me? What do I need to say to, like, not meet those stereotypes, blah, blah, blah. I kind of got the sense from Elizabeth that she was, like, all of a sudden just needing to, like, deal with all of this, you know, stigmatization of her mental health and her mental health condition. It was just, I just felt so bad for her, because it seems like they were teasing this in the preview, this idea that she's kind of getting to the point where, like, it's going to be hard for her to really, like, open up and connect and relax and just, like, be in the moment when it feels like she's getting attacked for this part of her. So I kind of feel like Shanae is going to succeed in knocking Elizabeth out of the running, because I just think Elizabeth is now going to be too overwhelmed. And it's annoying, because it's just such a good example of, like, able-bodied people don't need to deal with this, but, you know, people who have this kind of condition do. Like, you know, I don't have any kind of that type of condition, and it's not something I ever have to worry about someone coming at me for that kind of stuff. And it's like, it just sucks that Elizabeth can't just be able to enjoy her time. She has to worry about random people like Shanae, like, coming at her for something that is just, you know, part of who she is. So I just felt so bad about it.
I just love how you brought up ableism as you were just talking. It's like, yes, yes, yes. I wish that they had some type, like, the show acknowledged that interaction was completely inappropriate with some type of, like, you know how they do those, like, 1-800 numbers or those websites for more
I kind of wish they had done something like that too. I was thinking that.
It's like, be more aware. I really hated seeing the interaction. I was like, I want to just, like, turn this off, but I can't.
Right. I kind of had that feeling too. I was like, this is kind of going too far. Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of how I felt. I was like, this is going too far. And I was kind of, to your point, hoping that the show would take more of, like, a clear, like, this is messed up. Like, you know, Shanae is talking about Elizabeth this way. Like, this is messed up. But the show really didn't take any kind of stance. And it just, you know, I just left with such an icky feeling. And I feel bad for Elizabeth. I hope that this gets resolved, maybe in the after the final rose kind of thing, or the women tell all. Like, I think that's the next time that I can imagine this getting resolved, because I don't feel like it's going to get resolved on the show, but I guess we'll see. That's all we really have to say about Shanae. Not loving it. So let's move on from talking about villains and start talking about people who are standing out to us. What contestants and what connections seem to be starting to flourish, and which connections we're starting to think have some potential. Julie, who's been sticking out to you?
I would say Susie is slowly coming out as, like, okay, they definitely have a thing for each other. She gets really good edits. She
does, doesn't she?
Her personality is highlighted very positively. So it makes me feel like she's going to make it far. But something I've always noticed of editing is that, like, these, like, early one-on-ones, especially for The Bachelor, it's not indicative of them making it to, like, the top 4. So I can see her, like, making it kind of soon. But, like, I think the top 4 people, they're going to start to really come out, like, middle of the season. When the season gets really a lot more solidified. So I thought Susie, great edit. I liked their vibe together. I didn't think it was so romantic. I didn't think it was so intense. Like, they definitely have something good. But I didn't really get a sense that it was, like, anything super, like, in-depth. But what did you think about any standouts in Susie so far?
Well, I did like, I mean, funnily enough, I mean, Susie was the person that I kind of slightly made fun of her first impression last week. Like, I was kind of like, she was just like, had that whole thing about, I want to be out of my comfort zone type of girl. I'm the wild one in the group.
He ate it up. Yeah.
And he ate it up. And it's funny that she said that. I mean, this just goes to show that first impressions, like, really don't tell you much.
Nothing.
Because in this date, she was so, like, humble and quiet and peaceful. Like, she wasn't at all that kind of, like, wild girl. So I don't know why she was, like, trying to portray that on the first day, because today, and this is what Clayton liked about her, she was just so, like, down to earth, and she was so genuine, and, like, I was even like, oh my gosh, this is so different from how she was, like, trying to be on the first episode. And I appreciated it. I thought she was, like, I liked her a lot more this episode than I did in the first episode, and I think Clayton was kind of into it. I think Clayton seemed to be buying it. I kind of liked their connection quite a bit. At first, I did kind of see what you were saying, that, like, it felt like he didn't have chemistry, like, when they were on the airplane, and then when they or the helicopter, they were kind of sitting away from each other and stuff.
Yeah, I get that, though, the nerves, you know?
That's kind of what I was wondering. I was like, I wonder if he just kind of likes her and thinks she's, like, really cool and is, like, being kind of shy. Like, that's kind of the vibe I was starting to get. And by the time of their dinner date, it felt like they were really connecting, and he was really liking the way she was, like, opening up and talking about her family and, like how close she is with her family. And it just seemed like they were starting to form a connection, or he was starting to see sides of her. And, like, one thing that stuck out to me is that she said something about her family and, like, you know, looking at things in this positive way, and he was like, you know, that's actually something that I really struggle with, but I want to get better. Like, Clayton, like, revealed this little bit of not insecurity, but this, like, personal struggle. And he said it in this, like, very, like, it just came out so naturally. Like, it didn't even feel like okay, now I have to tell my personal trauma type of moment, like, that the show can kind of encourage. It just felt like he was just naturally responding to Susie being vulnerable, and he was like, I can be vulnerable in this moment too. And so that to me was like, oh, that felt like a very genuine moment of, let me let you in on this thing that I actually personally struggle with. And he just said it very subtly, and then they moved on from that bit of the conversation. But it did feel to me like, okay, it seems like Clayton is really, like, connecting with the things that she's saying. So I kind of liked them. I think that they are a cute connection. You're right that just because they have a connection early on doesn't mean that they're gonna progress, just, like, knowing the way this show works. But I don't know. I kind of like their vibe so far. I kind of hope she does progress.
Yeah, and I love that you picked up on that little bit of a detail on the date, because as you're saying it, it's like, oh, right, he did, and it felt very organic. And that's, like, I think the marker of, like, a date going well. It's like you're slowly being like, I feel safe enough to just kind of, like, offer little bits of myself just to, like, you know, tell you a little bit more about me that goes beyond this persona, this image that I'm presenting. So I love that you picked that up, because that does show, like, okay, there's something there, and I'm all for, like, slow burns. I think slow burns are so sustainable.
Completely
Sparks
agree.
Just flame out super fast.
Completely agree.
Susie's good.
Yeah. Anyone else? I think they keep trying to tease Teddi as, like, a contestant that he's connecting with, but I actually can't really tell if he's genuinely connecting with her. I think she's so hot and she seems so cool and interesting. I just don't really know if they're actually vibing. You know, it seems like the show wants us to think that they're vibing, but I just wasn't necessarily convinced by it.
Like, a connection I could kind of see is Gabby, which is a random.
Yeah!
Did you see that? She has, like, there's something, fun fact, she dated Dean on Bachelor in Paradise.
Oh my god, I was starting to see some, like, news percolating about that. I haven't read about it
and
yet,
it's so
I don't
funny
want to get
because
spoiled, but
she looks similar to Kaylin.
She
just like, doesn't she, like, their face structure? I'm
something
like,
about, I was thinking that too.
Dean has a type. He has a type. He's not Clayton, that's for sure. Like, Dean knows what he likes. You know? Like, I think that...
OMG.
Dude, Gabby has, like... There's something... She's getting, like, that girl next door humor edit that I think will, like, carry her pretty far in this season and through, like, Clayton's affections. I think that he likes it whenever she's around him. There's, like,
I kind of
this
agree.
sparkle, you know? Like, it's very light.
Yeah.
It's not, like... It's not always, like, connecting and super heavy. It's, like, joking and laughing. Like, that's a really fun energy to be on.
Totally. I was kind of noticing that, too. She has kind of, like, a weird sense of humor, which is
Really
very
weird.
endearing. Like, I don't know. She
like
just,
it.
like, says things that I'm like, what are you saying? But it's, like, charming. And so...
Yeah.
And I think that he is kind of getting that vibe, too. Like, I think that he seems to be, like, into the fact that she's just, like, kind of weird and, like in a cute way.
I like that he likes... It gives him more personality to, like, someone like Gabby, honestly.
I agree!
It's just, like, that kind of...
Completely agree.
Clayton does not seem like he would date... I mean, Gabby, I think she has a very dynamic personality. And being around him makes him more interesting.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I would like to see more Gabby content. I'm hoping we get more from her. Yeah. But yeah, she's kind of a fun one. I can't tell yet if I think there's like a true connection there, but she's definitely a fun contestant that I would like to see more of. Mm-hmm. The only other person who I think is sticking out to me is Rachel. So Rachel we haven't seen like a lot of her interactions with Clayton. I just kind of get the sense, and maybe I'm just biased because she's so like gorgeous, and it's like every time I see, I'm like, my goodness, like every time I see her, I'm like, whoa, like, and she kind of has the look. I don't know if this is like a mean thing to say. She has the look of someone who you would kind of expect to be a villain. Like, just like, she's so pretty that you kind of expect her to be kind of mean, but she hasn't done anything mean. I just kind of had a vibe that she could be mean, but I think that Clayton really was gravitating toward her last week. Like, it felt like she was like the only person that I think he pulled. He was like, there's one person that I really want to talk to who I haven't talked to yet, and it was Rachel. And I just felt like in this episode, I kept feeling like she was just getting shown a lot, even though, like, she didn't really interact with Clayton a lot. Like, I felt like the producers were showing her a lot. So that just kind of gave me a little bit of a vibe of, like, okay, so Clayton likes her, the producers like her. Like, I could probably see, and I feel like Clayton would connect with her once they have an opportunity to do that. So she's someone that I also have an eye on, who I think is sticking out to me and probably sticking out to Clayton, but we'll see.
Our prediction, our thesis for like Clayton's season in terms of him not really being able to like be super discerning towards people, that is just getting proven the more that these episodes are progressing.
Totally.
He's like taking back roses, which is fine. Like, you can change your mind, but I think it does show that he has this suggestibility to him that's going to give him a lot of... Yeah. It's going to give him a lot of trouble.
Totally. This episode definitely contributed, I think, to our theory that we posited last week, which is that he kind of is just, like, so compatible with so many different people. He's not very discerning, and, like...
Yeah.
It seems like he's gonna connect with Shanae eventually, and it's like just like in the previews it seemed to be teasing that, and it's just funny to me. I'm like, okay, so he's connecting with the villains just as much as he's connecting with like girls like Sarah and Teddi. Okay, so that's all the standouts for us, all the standouts and all the contestants and connections that are sticking out to us so far. We'll see kind of how the season pans out. The only other thing that happened this episode, which I am guessing we're gonna get into more in our next episode, is this idea that Cassidy has like a friends with benefits type situation that Sierra brought up to Clayton, and it definitely was kind of like the way the producers showed it to us was very much like a gotcha moment. So I'll be curious to see how that pans out. I definitely have like some opinions about that. Sierra is the same person who made that cow's milk comment last week. So I do actually kind of get the sense that Sierra is like a little bit like, can you believe Cassidy is having sex with someone? Which doesn't necessarily strike me as a bad thing per se. But, you know, I guess let's see when we have more information, and I guess we'll get more information next week about what's going on. But for you all watching, let us know down in the comments below, what are you thinking about this whole like Cassidy friends with benefits situation? What are your initial thoughts? And what are your thoughts on the whole Shanae, Elizabeth drama, the Cassidy drama? Let us know down below, and let us know if you have any standouts, any people who are sticking out to you, who you think are really vibing with Clayton, who Clayton is really vibing with. And that's all for this week. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you aren't subscribed already. Hit the little bell so you get notifications for when we upload our next video. I think we're off next week. There isn't an episode of Clayton's season happening this next week, so we do have a break.
God bless. Thank you.
So you'll see us whenever that next episode airs.